Susan Close is the Minister for, now I think I've got this all correct, Water, River Murray and the Environment, or you got climate change as well?
Yeah, near enough. It's called Climate, Environment and Water, but yes, absolutely, the River Murray's central to all of that.
Absolutely, and look, there's been a lot of water coming down the Murray, floodwaters finally receding, and you've got your federal colleague, Murray Watt, the Agriculture Minister. We'll catch him tomorrow, I think. He's over for an agricultural conference, but he's also made an announcement about helping locals clean up.
That's right. So, yeah, while people in Adelaide probably think, the flood's gone now because the water's starting to go down, people living along the river know that there's a long time ahead of us when we're going to be cleaning up and getting things back to normal. The first thing people want to do is clean up the rubbish. So what we've got is a program that's a combination of federal money and state money to allow people to have free dumping for five vouchers to help them clean up and get rid of that rubbish so that they can really start to get into their houses or their workplaces, their properties.
And I understand that people can register their interest to take part, but you can just turn up to a transfer station, the old, rubbish dump they used to call them, and they'll have vouchers there for you. Is that right?
That's right, but we do need to get a client ID, so it's easiest if you're able to do that through a phone call first. We've already had more than 1,000 people register, so there's that number, 1800 302 787. That's the number that we've been using to get flood assistance all along, and this is one you can give a call, register that you need help, get a client ID number, and it'll just make it a whole lot quicker at the transfer station. And as I say, it's up to 5 vouchers, so if you are dealing with a whole lot of rubbish that's accumulated, stuff that used to be fine and probably treasured possessions, but the water's done a lot of damage, we're there to help you out with that.
I dare say some of that stuff's not even from your property. It's found its way downstream from someone else's.
Well, exactly, that's right. And you do hear about, not just small things, but boats arriving from someone else's property. There's a lot of tidying up that's going to have to happen. But what we really want people to know is that the state government, the federal government are there to be side by side with the communities as we start to put things back together.
I want to touch base with you on something before we talk about buybacks in the Murray Darling Basin, a very important ministerial meeting coming up on Friday. But something that actually is connected to the River Murray a long way off is the Eyre Peninsula. In one sense, they do rely sometimes on water from the Murray. What's the latest with this desalination site selection? I understand that they've finished their work, the committee. Where are we up to?
That's right. So your listeners may well be aware that the water supply for the Eyre Peninsula for Port Lincoln is under serious threat. We think that the Ulysses South Basin, which is the biggest supply of the water, and you're absolutely right, they get some water from the Murray as well. We think that basin is going to be unusable past about 2025, 2026 as we continue to draw down on it. So we've known for a while that we need to build a desalinisation plant, a desal plant, and we need to get that cracking because we're running out of time. Now, the previous government was uncertain about whether the place that they'd selected, the site that they'd selected, was going to be acceptable to some members of the community. So they set up this site selection committee, and it was chaired by Peter Treloar, who is a very, very decent man, was the Liberal member for that area. It doesn't matter, he's on the other side of politics. I have a huge amount of time for him. So he's chaired that committee with a lot of locals. They've looked at other sites and they've given us their report. SA Water spent a lot of money, not just in the delays in starting the project, because as you know, everything's got more expensive recently, but also has spent a lot of money looking at each of those sites, testing how much it would cost to put the desal plant there. And now SA Water's getting its advice together, and I think we'll be able to make it as an announcement in the next couple of weeks. It's a money issue and it's a timing issue. We can't keep waiting. We can't have Port Lincoln running out of water. We've also been able to have a study done on the original site to check whether it has any negative impact on the local environment there and on the aquaculture. That's been a really positive study suggesting that the extra salt would not be above background levels. So we're putting
Now that one, is that Boston Bay, or are we talking the Sleaford still?
Billy Light's Point.
Yep.
Light's Point is the one that SA Water has settled on and is kind of regarded as the base case, as the one that is the cheapest because it's not least because it's the closest, but also the geology there is really good. Then we've looked at these other sites. We've gone to Canberra to see if there's any money there, and if there is, what timing there might be. And we're going to be able to come out with a really clear answer in the next couple of weeks. And I'm very happy to come back on your radio and talk about it when we're ready for that.
Yeah, that'd be good. We did check with the federal government. They'd indicated about a month ago they hadn't received any requests for funding, but you've spoken to some of your federal Labor colleagues. There might be something coming?
So I'm not sure who you spoke to, but I know that Peter Treloar and someone from our Environment and Water Department went probably, 6 or 8 weeks ago to Canberra. So they've definitely received that, and we've been communicating with Tanya Plibersek's office about that as well.
Yeah, we're hoping to speak with her also about this next topic, which is the Murray Darling Basin Ministers meeting. Now, this is coming on Friday. You're concerned that the state opposition isn't on Team SA. What do you mean by that?
Well, look, here's the thing. Politics is all very well, and, I'm sitting in Parliament House right now, and it all gets exciting and hot at times, but often there are issues that just require all of us to pull together as a single state, and the Murray River absolutely should be that one. Every single person in South Australia has an interest in a healthy Murray Darling Basin, one that's sustainable long into the future, not least because we are at the bottom of the river, and if we don't argue for a healthy river, no one is going to, because the other states are quite happy to keep taking the water. We need the water to keep flowing so that it can flow out into the sea, and that means it's a healthy river and it's not getting salty and silted up from the mouth upwards. So we all have that interest. What I'm trying to do is reach out to the opposition and say, can we just work together on this? Because if we have one side of politics saying, we don't like this idea, then what the other states do is go, you guys don't even agree. And that suits their interests, not ours. Our interests are to say to the federal government, we need every single option on the table to get the 450 gigalitres that's in the plan, but we've only got 4.5 gigalitres of it actually delivered. That's a huge gap. That is absolutely disgraceful, and it's because New South Wales and Victoria for a long time have said they do not want to give us this water. And so what we're saying is don't take any options off the table. There are efficiency schemes that ought to be being run, and there's also the idea of voluntary buybacks. If someone can sell their water to China, then they can sell their water to the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder for our 450 gigalitres. We just want one voice here, and that's what I'm asking the opposition to do.
Well, I've noted some material you've published that you claim there's no evidence voluntary buybacks have harmed river communities. Is that correct? That's your claim?
That's what the the Murray Darling Basin Royal Commission found, that as long as the way that you design the program is that you don't take all of the water from one region or even all of the water from one water holder, then what you get is efficiency. So someone sells some of their water, invests in efficiency and actually gets more productivity. And we've seen that in South Australia. The frustrating thing for South Australians, particularly the irrigators along the Murray, is that they are leaps and bounds ahead of the other states in water efficiency. We know that we can use less water and get more produce. And yet for some reason the eastern states governments are still quite happy to have open channel irrigation, quite happy to waste water rather than allowing it to be handed back to the environment to keep the whole thing healthy. So that's the argument that we need to be making with one voice.
And that, on the subject of buybacks, though, one irrigator or former irrigator is Anne Ruston, South Australian Senator. She had this to say about there being evidence or not of voluntary buybacks.
If his water minister is making such extraordinary ignorant comments as to say that buybacks haven't hurt river communities, she clearly hasn't done her homework. When I lived through the buybacks as an irrigator in the Riverland, the devastation to our community of the Swiss cheese approach of one property not having water and the next one having water, it was completely devastating. It took us years to recover from it.
So is Anne Ruston wrong, or are we on the same page here about buybacks?
Well, look, unfortunately, Anne Ruston, although a very pleasant woman when I meet her face to face, is a part of the Barnaby Joyce Scott Morrison government that spent 9 years completely failing to deliver the Murray Darling Basin Plan, taking efficiency schemes on farm off the table, putting a cap on voluntary buybacks so that people they can sell their water to a foreign entity, but they can't sell it to the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. The vast majority of the water that's come down into the Murray Darling Basin through the Murray Darling Basin Plan has been delivered through voluntary buybacks. We've had a Royal Commission look at it. They have not found that has caused problems. And Anne, unfortunately, sort of refers to the idea of you take all of one irrigator's water. That's not the best way to design a scheme. That's not one I'd support. The best way is to encourage partial sale of the water in order to generate efficiency but to maintain productivity. We can do this if we want to do this. But when we have different voices, it just serves the interests of the states that don't want to give more water to the environment to make it a healthy Murray-Darling.
Well, Susan Close is the Water Minister. Plenty of work to be done before the Friday meeting of Basin Ministers. Thanks so much for joining us today, Susan. We do look forward to that update about Eyre Peninsula desalination as well.
I'll be very pleased to come back on your show. Thanks, Ricky.
Thanks, Susan.